back to the Connie and Lottie Michael podcast on the great state of Alaska. We've got lots of good stuff we want to share today. Connie, what are we going to talk about?
We're going to talk about who owns Alaska. But before we get...
Can it be me?
Or me.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, maybe just a little bit. I'm going to tell you how much you can own, but it's going to take me a while to get there. So, first of all, William Seward, the Secretary of Interior, purchased Alaska in a treaty in March 30th, 1867. Okay. For $7.2 million. That sounds like a pretty good deal today, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Right. Because it encompassed 412 square miles. That's what it added to the territory of the United States, which was actually 2 cents per acre. Lottie,
Good deal.
how much money, Joey's, how much is an acre in land today, right?
Depending on where, but nothing is 2 cents.
Nothing is 2 cents, right? All right. Well, I'll let you think about that because we're going to have to talk about what today's market rate is for various types of acreages before I let you go for today. All right. So then we became a state, and that was on January 3rd, 1959. I wasn't here.
I was dancing on our front lawn at 634 K Street. We were all dancing. I didn't know what we were happy about, but I was happy.
All right. Okay. Well, that's a good story. Thinking about Russia for just a moment, I just want to share that I have actually been to Russia 2 or 3 different times. I took the Orient Express from Moscow to Beijing all by myself. Lake Baikal, I will always remember that because it reminds me of the home that I had at Big Lake. I remember the story about St. Petersburg. The docent at the museum said that during the war, World War II, they cut out all of the paintings and left only the frames, and they left the museum open, and then the docents would tell the story about each one of the paintings.
And where were the paintings taken?
I have no idea. They were
probably somewhere for safekeeping.
Yeah, for safekeeping.
Interesting.
Then I remember actually that Vladivostok is one of my favorite cities, which is on the eastern border of Russia, and it's really a lot where a lot of their military bases are. And what I remember about that, because I was just a young land developer, that they used their beaches for junkyards. They didn't understand the value of the beaches, right? And then, of course, the University of Alaska had a lot of exchanges, and I happened to be able to be a hostess for some of the visitors from Russia. And I remember taking them to New Car's grocery store on Huffman, and they had never seen so much food in one location. And they all cried when they saw all that food, because when I had been in Russia, there were bare shelves. There was hardly any food in any of the stores. And part of that reason was they didn't have transportation that could take fresh produce and fresh meat into the cities. They just didn't have the trucking, the refrigerated trucking and that sort of thing. So I have no idea what Russia is like today with Putin, but I have some really good memories about visiting Russia. And of course, we still have a population here that speaks Russian, especially down on the Kenai Peninsula. There was a lot of marriages between the native population and Russians earlier in our century. So, yeah, we are connected. And of course, we just had the summit, right, of Trump and Putin. So
here in Anchorage.
Right, here in Anchorage at the Jade Pear military facility. So back to Alaska and how much land we actually have. I just had to tell you those stories. So Alaska is so large that it encompasses 3 states, the size of 3 states. Do you have any idea what those states are?
No, I would say this would cut. Let's see, we could double the size of Texas. No, I don't know.
All right. So
Quick answer.
the quick answer is bigger than the combined states of Texas. Give me another state, another big state.
California.
California, that's right. And another state that
Nevada, Dakota.
you're getting close, Montana.
Montana's a big state.
It's a big state. So Alaska is larger than the combined states of Texas, California, and Montana. That's how big Alaska is. And that states that could fit into Alaska: New York, Florida, Oklahoma, Indiana, and Pennsylvania. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 states that could all fit into the state of Alaska. Now, we could say, but we only have one representative in the U.S. House. Right. Despite our size, geographically our size. So you could fit 2.5 Texas, 4 Californias, 4.5 Montanas. The smallest state in our union is Rhode Island.
Right.
So we could have 430 Rhode Island states in Alaska. Isn't that just amazing? I mean, that's just, it's hard to imagine really how big we are. So do you have any idea about the square miles that we have in Alaska?
No, I'd be guessing at 530,000 or something like that.
Well, you're sort of getting close. It is 500. I have to look it up, really. So here I am looking it up, and it is.
While you're looking, I'm going to talk.
Okay.
I read somewhere that we have the most coastline of any state in the country. And that's logical because Alaska is all coastline, but still it's pretty impressive that we have the largest coastline.
So Alaska, 663,268 square miles.
So that's 25% more than I guessed.
Right.
Right. Wow.
Yeah. Square miles, not acres. Yeah, but square miles. So for all of you that are listening, Alaska is a huge state, and we're very proud of that.
That's what Alaska means. The definition.
Is that right? Really?
Denali, Alaska, Alyeska, all mean or translate into the Great Land.
Okay.
The Great Land in size or spirit or however you want to define great, but that's the definition of those 3 words.
Okay. All right. So how many acres of land then do we have
Available for privates?
No, I'm getting to that one. Just
How many acres?
acres. Yeah, not square miles now. How many acres?
Oh, well, if it's 600, I would say it's 10, almost 10 of that.
It's 365 million acres of land. Wow. I mean, that's pretty. All right. So then how many acres of land is, because this is about who owns Alaska. So how many acres of land is owned by the state and federal government? A percentage. Just give me a percentage.
I would guess 98%.
No, but 85%.
Oh, I would have guessed much higher than that.
Huh. Okay.
I wonder what the average is for.
Oh, over 85%, approximately 89%, 65% owned by the U.S. federal government, and 24.5% owned by the state of Alaska. Then the Alaska Native Corporation.
The native allotment, right?
Right. They own 12.5% of Alaska.
So what does that leave for private sector?
It leaves approximately 1.21 acres per person. But basically, what the concern is when you add all that up, land held in conventional private ownership, like land that you might own or I might own, or
Well, to cover
Valley.
Safeway,
Right.
Costco, whatever.
Right. amounts to less than 1%
Okay.
of Alaska, all of Alaska.
And my guess was 2%.
Yeah. So it's about 1%. Jeez. But even still, that is 900,000 acres. Okay. But not all of it is accessible, right? So then if you take 900,000 acres, right, and you divide it by our population, which is 741,147, according to the latest census and Perplexity, right? That's AI is helping us get all this information quickly. So we theoretically, every person, you and me, we could all own 1.21 acres per person if everything was divided up. After you take off the federal government, the state government, the local government, and you take off the native population, the native allotment, I should say, then what's left is 1% for a private citizen and private ownership. Okay. Whether it's a corporation or an individual.
Yeah. And that's land mass, which includes bodies of water, which includes tundra, which includes land that's not at all developable.
Correct. Right.
That's huge.
Right.
Yeah.
So speaking of that, how many lakes does Alaska have?
Which state is it that has a land of 1,000 lakes? Is that
Minnesota?
Minnesota?
Right.
Minnesota. 4,000 lakes. No, I'm just guessing. 4,000.
It has 3 million lakes.
Think I could get something with lakefront.
Right. But only 3,000 of them are officially named. So you're very close. Right. You're very, very close. Most of them are small, glacially carved or seasonal lakes. But we have also home to some of the largest lakes in the United States, which is, for example, Lake Iliamna.
Yeah, I think that's the largest lake in the country.
Have you ever been to Lake Iliamna?
No.
I haven't either.
We're not rich enough.
We're not rich enough because there are some very exclusive residences and camps at Lake Iliamna. And you have to fly through this pass.
Fly through the pass, and it's completely surrounded by government land. So you can't drive to that's as I remember.
Right. I knew you can't drive to we also can't drive to Juneau, our state capital.
Right. Yeah, which is bizarre.
It is very bizarre. But
we're not talking politics.
No, we're not talking politics, so we're just gonna move on. So I think what's interesting here when we talk about who owns Alaska, there is really not a lot of opportunity for private citizens or private corporations to actually own and develop land. Because for example, here in Anchorage, we know that land is very scarce to build on because we have Chugach State Park. We have the military bases.
So we have Chugach on the east side of the Anchorage and then military base on the north side.
Yes.
Okay. And then south, we have the inlet.
Right. Yeah. We have water, mountains, and the military bases. And that's probably one of the reasons why 57 cars go back and forth between Anchorage and the Valley almost on a daily basis.
57,000 a day?
Yes. Well, I remember when it was 20,000 and I thought that was a lot. Right. And I remember when I was on the Planning and Zoning Commission and we talked about 20,000 cars a day. But from one port, from Port Mackenzie in the Valley to an area here in Anchorage, which all those cars would land on in the Fairview district if we had a bridge, was not enough to support the cost of the bridge across the inlet.
Right. Well, I agree with that. I was here in 1964. I was a child, but I've post-traumatic stress syndrome from the earthquake of 1964. And I can tell you that all that land sloughed away, and I think I would always just drive around to Point Mackenzie on the road. I don't think I'm for every year. I got to take the bridge. I've never been
and I think there are a lot of people that feel the same way. So let's talk about, now that we know that we could all have 1.23 acres, even though some of it would be wet, theoretically, right, a tundra or whatever, which is about, let's talk about, do we have good income here? Is Alaska a good place for people to come and earn a good income?
I believe it is. I believe we have less barriers of entry into business,
That's a nice.
barriers of entry into home ownership. So yes, I believe this is a great place to start your family or to grow your family, and certainly to grow your wealth.
So the median household income here, and just reading about this, is $89,336. That is from a couple of years ago, but it is higher by 13.75% than the national at median.
Plus, what we might not be considering when we say that number out loud is we do not have a state income tax.
Correct.
We do not have a state sales tax.
Correct.
We're careful with how we tax ourselves. So we have tax on tobacco and alcohol and marijuana, but we don't have all these we don't have so many of the hidden taxes the rest of the country is burdened with.
Don't we have bed tax?
I believe, and I've been involved with the hospitality industry, we do have a bed tax, but that's Anchorage imposed. So that's an Anchorage imposed tax. But I think every community that I'm familiar with has a bed tax.
Okay. All right. That Anchorage and Fairbanks, however, does not have a sales tax.
Right.
But if you go out to the valley, they have a sales tax.
Right.
Yeah, a small sales tax, 2.3%.
The argument with that is, right now, and this is just a discussion, all of these services are paid for by property taxes.
Yes.
And primarily that's commercial property tax, because homeowners have, exemptions for seniors, exemptions for veterans, exemptions for disabilities. But there are really, for commercial properties, there's no exemptions. I mean, there's a few that you hear about, but so a sales tax would alleviate that. So the Valley said, you know what, let's tax ourselves, make it a little bit more equitable. But that should probably be a podcast by itself, because that's the kind of,
I don't disagree with you.
I don't either.
We're just new into doing these podcasts, so we probably shouldn't get into an argument right in the very beginning. Right.
Let's call it a discussion.
A discussion. Right. We're going to put taxes aside for a minute. This is really about who owns Alaska. Right. And what I think is so important is that even though we're this huge state encompassing geographically all of these other states, we have a very small population, and we don't have as much opportunity, I would say, if you just look at it, because the land that we have, that 1% or almost less than 1%, has lakes, it has wetlands, it has permafrost,
it has access issues.
Because we have areas that don't have a road or that don't have a railroad to it. Right.
How do you get to Nome, Alaska, where there's a lot of mining up there? How do you get to?
You get the dog mushy. The Iditarod. Dog mushy. What else you got there, Connie? Well, I'm looking here. I think what is, where do most people live here then?
In the state of Alaska?
Yeah. Where do
today, the bulk of the population is in the Anchorage metropolitan area.
Yes.
So Anchorage is Girdwood, Birchwood, it's a big area. And the marketing, a retailer would, even some of them will include parts of the valley as.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because the U.S. Census counts the Mat-Su Borough and the municipality of Anchorage as South Central Alaska.
Right.
And they combine all of that. And so when you're looking at national statistics, it's a bit deceiving, because there is a real distinct difference between the municipality of Anchorage and the Mat-Su Valley. Right. So The Matsu Valley has over 100,000 population. I think it's like 107,000. And we have just under 300,000 population. But yet they are outpacing us as far as home building is concerned. Because what you've said all along, and let's talk about that, if you want retail or you want grocery stores or you want whatever, you have to have the rooftops first.
Right. We're not going to get a Trader Joe's out in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
And so many meetings I go to, the residents say, when are we getting a Trader Joe's? That's not on anyone's radar. And it won't be until they have enough families and homes and rooftops to support a grocery store, to support that tied to that grocery store. I do a lot of work with different national retailers. And we do a lot of demographic reporting. So we'll identify a site and we'll do a 3-mile radius and a 1-mile radius and a 5-mile radius. And even then we have to educate the retailer and say, well, that's not a big enough radius because we're going to get people from Fairbanks coming in.
Right.
And depending on what it is they sell, it might be, and we've got a lot of residents in Nome and Juneau that still shop out of Anchorage or still shop out of this area. So a typical demographic report for Anchorage, for Alaska, doesn't show the whole picture.
Well, let's talk about Fred Meyer's for a minute, actually, because there are 2 huge Fred Meyer stores in the valley. One's in Palmer and one is in Wasilla.
Right.
And they are the nicest stores in the state.
The Fairbanks Airport Way Fred Meyer's is maybe 2 or 3 in the country.
Really?
The volume. The volume? Unbelievable. And Fairbanks boasts 2 Fred Meyer's, both superstores. So, but in the valley, can they afford it? Yes. There's 2 Fred Meyer's, there's 2 Safeways, there's Walmart, there's all, and then 3 Bears, which is a Costco reseller.
Right.
They see what's going on in the valley, and they're there to service the rooftops. The rooftops are coming. They're going to start selling milk and eggs and butter. And
just like what Target's doing. Target has a lot of groceries out there. Oh, they have the biggest Target store that I think I've ever seen out there. They just keep adding and adding and adding.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's because it's growing so fast. You know better than I how many rooftops are in the valley and how many are being planned. But that's the growth area. And so first comes the housing, and then comes the grocery store, and then comes a dental office. And the medical field is booming in the valley. So then you'll have a nail salon, and then pretty soon people don't drive into Anchorage to get anything done. They have all of that gravity and orbit right there in the valley. And that's what we're seeing happening in the valley now.
But aside from what you've just named, the services that you've just named, there is still employment. It's not the major employment center yet. Not yet. We have all these cars driving into Anchorage, which remains sort of the commercial and the employment center of the state.
Today it is, yeah. Yes. But just like if you look in the rest of the country, the suburbs become pretty much a city unto itself.
Right.
You leave New York City and you move to the suburbs. Well, then you have to move out of the suburbs and go to its suburb. I mean, it's just, you move out, but then you want everything near you.
Right.
You moved out to get away from everyone, but you want your doctor there. You want your attorney there. You want your groceries there. Okay, now it's too big. Now we have to move out again. And so now we're moving out of Anchorage,
right,
to the valley.
Yeah.
And the valley is expanding.
Right. And now some people are moving all the way to Willow.
Exactly.
Right. Exactly. Because it's on the road system. They have lakes, right? And it's become more than just a recreational area. It's a place where people live on a long-term basis. That reminds me of a story. I once had to hire a New York attorney for a business issue. And so I remember we were having lunch one day. He was Italian. We were having lunch at an Italian restaurant. I always remember that. And I said, how do you manage living in such a big city? And he said, well, it's just a 6-block radius. Everything I need, my office, my home, the dry cleaner, the grocery store, everyone is just in a 6-block radius. And that's what you were just talking about, right? These little pockets, and then everything gets overgrown, and then they move to another pocket and another pocket.
Exactly right.
Right. Yeah. So that's exactly what's happening in our community. Yeah, as far as the valley is concerned, which I consider part of our community now. But so then what happens to Anchorage?
Well, Anchorage could, I'm not a city planner.
Okay.
But, we're going to have to make some difficult decisions on how we want to move forward in Anchorage. We're going to have to make difficult decisions on how we want to deal with a lot of the issues that that every city is facing.
Mm-hmm.
Vagrants, growth, zoning. And we just hope the people we put in office, are equipped to make those difficult decisions.
So I think that is a great topic for our next podcast, actually, because we have a new administration. This new mayor has said Anchorage needs 10,000 housing units. The first year, I think we're going to maybe make 4 if we're really aggressive. Maybe half.
When you say 4, do you mean 4,000 housing units or 400?
400.
Okay.
Right. 1,000 housing units per year for the next 10 years.
Okay.
All right. And so knowing the amount of land that we have, so we're really, and the limitations of that, they're really talking about increasing the density along transportation corridors. They're talking about tax abatement for abandoned properties. I think there are between 300 and 400 abandoned properties. So they're talking about programs to encourage renovation of those properties, whether it's a tear down or a complete redo.
And then we should think about, do we want to add rental housing exclusively or predominantly, or do we want to encourage home ownership? Downtowns suffer when people don't live downtown.
Right.
That's when vandalism takes a big step into that. That's when crime is big. So we need to figure out if we as Anchorage wants more rental housing, or we want more ownership, or how we want to get people to live downtown.
Well, that is a real concern for me, because I believe so fervently in home ownership as it creates social stability, as it helps improve educational standards and test scores. And I don't want us to be a camp town.
Yeah.
Right. Which basically that's what you would call a community when the railroads were being built or oil was being discovered and mining and all that sort of thing. We build all this housing that's almost temporary housing. And right now there is the idea that, we're going to be able to go up to 72 feet. Well, that means at least 6 stories. And I don't believe I've owned rentals. I once owned 152 rentals. Like we've said previously, it was not my thing. I didn't like it. And so I didn't keep them. But the rental market, renters are different than people who invest in their community with home ownership.
And going vertical isn't the same price as going horizontal.
Well,
it changes everything.
Okay.
It changes the construction. It changes fire issues. It changes everything. So going up may not be the panacea of increased housing, because that's going to be more expensive.
It's more expensive on a price per square foot. If you have 6 stories or 7 stories, you're talking about interior corridors. You're talking about interior corridors that are common areas that have to be maintained, that you're going to go down a long hallway to get to your front.
But just construction itself is
Yeah.
different. The elevator is different.
Yeah.
The fire code is, everything is different. So that will change. We can't just say it costs X amount of dollars for floors 1 through 4. So we just do that for floors 8 through.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, that'll.
All right. That's a good topic for our next podcast. Maybe we might even bring someone in from the planning department, the long range planning, because this is a hot topic of conversation right now.
Right.
All right. So I agree. We'll talk about that in our next podcast.
Perfect.
All right. Thank you.